Listen, that we wrote a paper in 2017 called the Press Pulse Therapeutic Strategy for Managing Cancer, based on our new knowledge that cancer is predominantly a mitochondrial metabolic disease and not a genetic disease. That paper presented the science and the structure or outline, if you will, for a detailed clinical study that would use press pulse metabolic therapy for managing cancer, and in particular glioblastoma, which is a deadly kind of brain cancer. So that was the skeletal structure for that. But the paper that just came out recently with Dr. Thomas Duryea as the first author and many other physicians, nutritionists, and scientists, fleshes out the outline of that original paper. In other words, puts meat and what to do, how to do it, and why am I doing what I'm doing. So that is a very, very detailed description of how to manage glioblastoma effectively with minimal or no toxicity. And Thomas and the rest of us recognized all of the different issues that would be confronted in managing these deadly cancers. And as a matter of fact, it can be tweaked very, very minimally to be the effective treatment for all major cancers, because all cancers are a singular, very similar type of disease. They have a common pathophysiological problem. They are restricted in using only two fuels: the glucose sugar and the glutamine amino acid glutamine. So it's in a nutshell, it tells people how to bring down glucose, and you raise ketones, which could be done by a number of different procedures, diets and supplements and things like this, and then drug targeting glutamine. So it's a diet drug approach that simultaneously restricts the two metabolites needed for the tumor to grow and transitions the body off to a fuel that the tumors can't use. So the normal cells of the body get healthier and healthier, and the tumor cells get weaker and weaker and eventually are eliminated. So, and this can be done with minimal or no toxicity. And the paper outlines the strategies for doing this. No, that's one of the big problems. I don't understand how people can get so confused. I try to dumb this down as best I can, and it's still. I'm sorry to say that there's still some. No, you're 100% correct. You cannot lower glutamine with diet. You cannot lower glutamine with diet. See, when I was in the Army years ago, we would learn things by repeating, and even the slowest witted guy would eventually get the message.
Yeah.
That's Army. That's the way we train people in the military. So at least in the old draft Army, when we had folks from every state in the country were contributing there, and we had to make sure our knowledge base was everybody knew exactly what was going on. Yes. So people say, can I eat glutamine? Do I have to target glutamine? No. The answer is we need drugs. We have specific drugs that will specifically pulse, which means intermittent targeting of glutamine with a drug while the diet holds the glucose down and elevates the ketones. You can't do that with a diet to target glutamine. Glutamine is the most abundant amino acid in the body. So now we have some evidence. Yes, if you have cancer and you have a very aggressive tumor, and you were to drink gallons of fluid containing high dose glutamine all day long, it might make the tumor grow a little faster. Yes, but nobody does that. This is like nonsense. This is idiocy. So, but the answer is, No, if you don't have cancer, having a high glutamine, having glutamine in the diet has no effect. Even if you have cancer, there is enough glutamine already in the bloodstream that is going to be more than enough for the tumor to use. So trying to say, oh, I'm eating a piece of meat's going to make my glutamine go up and the cancer is going to grow faster. No, no, no. It's not that. You have to target the glutamine with drugs. You have to target the glutamine with drugs. You don't have a diet that can lower glutamine. You don't have a diet that can lower glutamine. Why the hell is that so damn hard for anybody to understand?
It apparently is pretty hard to
Apparently it
understand.
is. I don't know.
Uh,
It's not only in Arkansas where they don't understand that. They don't understand that in Minnesota either, or Boston, or California. So yeah, well, that's a very good question because it's extremely difficult to get cancer if you have healthy mitochondria. And the mitochondria, people should know. This is why we have the internet, which is really very helpful. People can say, oh, what is the mitochondria? And if you go onto the internet, it says the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Um, and not only that, and everybody said, what does that mean? Well, it makes most of the energy for the cell. And without energy, nothing can grow. Okay, nothing can live without energy. You can talk about anything you want, but when you have no energy, you are inefficient in many ways, and a cell can't live. Cancer cells can't live without energy. So, but cancer cells have a defective energy production through oxygen, and that causes the cell to switch slowly over to a second form of energy, which is called fermentation energy, energy without oxygen. And this is the signature metabolic effect. The metabolic malady seen in all cancer cells is they have the inefficiency of mitochondrial energy production through oxygen, through oxygen. So they switched to an alternative ancient heirloomic form of energy, which is called fermentation. And this is why it's absolutely essential to understand evolutionary biology if one is to really understand cancer, because the cancer cells are using these ancient pathways that existed a billion years ago that would drive dysregulated growth. And it was all fermentation energy. And when I say that, so these were fuels. There was no oxygen in the atmosphere. We didn't have oxygen. Life arose in an anoxic environment without oxygen, and they grew very fast. These singular cell prokaryotic organisms, and we have archaeological records to show this. Fossil records of can you believe fossil records of single cell organisms? But the issue here is they would grow in a very dysregulated way until there was no fermentable fuels in the environment, and then they would die. So the only thing keeping them growing, and they were not growing regulated, because they had no mitochondria. They were dysregulated growth. That's what cancer is. Cancer is dysregulated growth, cell growth out of control. That's what cancer is, and that's because these cells are falling back on these ancient pathways where all the cells at that time were dysregulated and would die when the fermentable fuels in the environment were dissipated. So cancer cells are using the very similar pathways. The problem, but in the way we treat cancer and the way we think about it, we actually provide massive doses of the two fuels, allowing the cell to survive. Glucose and the amino acid glutamine are very abundant in our bodies if we have a high carbohydrate diet, and the glutamine is already there. We can't diet low of that. So we have to target the glutamine with drugs, and we can reduce glucose with diet, and then those are the two fuels driving the dysregulated growth. And to protect the normal cells of the body, we transition the whole body over to ketones. So ketone bodies, mitochondria can burn ketones. That's why water-only fasting, daily exercise, aerobic exercises, minimal carbohydrate diets, whether it's a pescatarian, carnivore, whatever the diet is, it would have very low carbs, a lot of exercise, ketone supplements, if you will. Keep your mitochondria super healthy. Then it becomes very, very hard to get cancer. Now you look at who's getting cancer. Where's all these cancer coming from? Does anybody notice that we have an obesity epidemic, or am I the only one who's noticed this? Right? Did you ever notice that? Are
Yeah.
people in Arkansas all fit and healthy looking? Did you ever see a fat person walking around in Arkansas? Then there should be no cancer in Arkansas.
Yeah.
But the problem is obesity is replacing smoking, and it's often associated with type 2 diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure, systemic inflammation. All of those things damage mitochondrial function chronically, leading to compensatory substrate level phosphorylation or fermentation and the onset of cancer. So this is no mystery here. What's going on. We already know all the provocative agents that can elicit mitochondrial damage. You avoid those processes, keep your mitochondria healthy, and it's very difficult for a person to get cancer when their mitochondria are healthy. And then you throw in, on top of obesity and some of these other, no exercise, obesity, poor sleep, chronic stress. Then you throw in microplastics, forever chemicals, GMO foods. You throw in all these kinds of things, and they all come together in a synergistic way to damage mitochondria chronically, leading to compensatory fermentation and dysregulated growth. No mystery here at all. Well, I don't know anything else but ATP that can produce energy. You want to know about that? Take cyanide. See how long you live without energy. I mean, it's just that simple, right? You want to tell me you don't think ATP is important? Okay, drink the Kool-Aid with the cyanide-laced Kool-Aid. You say, what happened? I'm dead. Yeah, you're dead real quick because you took ATP away from your body. And as a matter of fact, cancer cells can live in cyanide because they're not using oxidative phosphorylation. They're using substrate level phosphorylation, which is a fermentation mechanism. That tells us right off the bat that you know what's going on with these cancer cells. But yeah, the point you raise an extremely, extremely important point. Yes, it is true that the mitochondria do a lot of things. And a matter of fact, the mitochondria control our destiny. How long we will live as an entity on the planet is controlled by the mitochondria, because we die from the second law of thermodynamics, which is entropy. Entropy is damage and dysfunction. Okay, and eventually, when our mitochondria run out of energy because they're defective, and just we are programmed to die within a certain range. Okay, the oldest person that ever lived on the planet was Madame Clement from France, lived 122 years. Okay, she set the record by how long a human being could possibly live. And then, most people are dying in their late 70s, 80s. They're running out of energy. If you die naturally, rather than being run over by a car or shot or something like this. I mean, this is a different thing. But natural aging. So the mitochondria in our cells just accumulate wear and tear over the years, and we just run out of energy, ATP, and we die. But in cancer cells keep growing and growing and growing. All right. And why are they no longer regular? That's what we say, dysregulation. It's the mitochondria that is responsible for the dysregulated growth. How do we know this? Because you're right, Logan. It's not just the ATP. It's this proton motive gradient inside the mitochondria that controls flux of an ion called calcium. Calcium flux is regulated by the inner membrane of the mitochondria. So mitochondria can take up calcium and release calcium, take up calcium, and it does it in a very regulated way because this controls many of the biochemical processes of the cell. And cancer as a cell cycle, it goes through a cycle of growth. You replicate DNA, you have cytokinesis, the cells separate, and In normal wear and tear, we can build, like in our gut and other tissues, we can build new cells, and the cells will replace naturally dead cells. So as one group is dying, we have another group coming in. But this group coming in is regulated in its growth. It's not dysregulated in its growth. And the mitochondria control that regulation. When that organelle loses that proton motive gradient, which is linked to oxidative phosphorylation, by the way, the cell cycle, which is dependent on those calcium fluxes, is no longer regulated. So the energy of the mitochondria and the proton motive gradient regulate the division of the cell and the quiescent state of the cell, meaning it shouldn't grow. I'm doing what I do. I don't have to, the cell no longer needs to grow because the mitochondria are regulating the growth of the cell. So when that organelle becomes corrupted and not functioning, this cell now falls back on a dysregulated, starts to grow. Now, the mitochondria also contain the kill switch for our life. So what happens sometimes is that when mitochondria or something happens, when something happens in the cell that might be threatening to its existence, the mitochondria triggers the release of cytochrome C, which is an apoptotic signaling, programmed cell death. So when we have programmed cell death, the cell dies. Who controls program? Well, what organelle controls the program? It is the mitochondria controls the program. So when that organelle becomes corrupted, gradually over time, not acutely, a gradual corruption of the ability of that cell to generate energy efficiently, it loses control of the cell, and the cell falls back on these ancient pathways, because what's keeping it from the ancient pathways is the efficiency of oxidative phosphorylation. So insufficient oxidative phosphorylation, the cell loses its growth control, cell falls back on proliferation, which is the default state of all cells. What's keeping them from growing, being out of control? The function of the mitochondrial proton motive gradient, which is in fact linked to ATP synthesis. So we know biologically, evolutionary biology, why we're seeing what we're seeing. And more importantly, if this is growing out of control, what's fueling this dysregulated growth? And we know it's glucose and glutamine. Those are the only two fuels. How do we know that? Because we tested the fuels. We tested all the things these cells can use, and we eliminate on we find these two fuels are the key things driving this. So all other things in my mind are secondary. If you want to kill the cancer and you want to do it without toxicity, you have to strategically target the two fermentable fuels while transitioning the whole body over to ketones, and then we pulse the targeting of the glutamine, killing and gradually destroying the tumor, and let the normal immune cells come in and pick up the dead corpses and get rid of the damn tumor. So the problem is, what I'm telling you, I might as well be talking to plug sockets, because people don't understand what the hell I'm talking about. It's just, I don't know. I have to use crayons. I don't know what I have to do. Well, if it is, I don't know about it. I don't see much difference. Fatty acids, ketone bodies, and pyruvate. I mean, everything is broken down into even the proteins. You either have acetyl-CoA coming from a variety of things are broken down in the stomach and the intestines and releasing these metabolites back into the bloodstream. What comes into the cell is predominantly glucose, and you can get fat. Some brain cells don't use fatty acids, so they're only two fuels: glucose and ketone body, beta hydroxybutyrate. They don't burn fatty acids. The heart can burn fatty acids and glucose. The proteins are broken down into acetyl-CoA, so that's coming back. So is in fact, all the fatty acids are broken down into acetyl-CoA. Most of these things are broken down into acetyl-CoA. Glutamine comes in a different pathway. It comes in through the glutaminolysis pathway. It's an anaplerotic pathway. But as far as water is concerned, water is coming from oxygen. So oxygen is reduced to water. So if you stop breathing, you're not going to produce water because there's no oxygen coming into the system. So oxygen is the final acceptor, pulls the electrons through the electron transport chain. So if you don't breathe, you're not going to make water, right? I mean, there's no the water comes from the oxygen combining with the electrons of the food you ate. So, I'm not looking at water as a real. It's a downstream thing. What we really need to know is the role of oxygen, because cancer cells can grow without oxygen. So, do they produce water? They produce a little bit of water, because there is some electron transport chain working. It's just that it's not linked to ATP synthesis through the F1F0 ATPase, which we call complex 5. So that's where you get the energy from. But the oxygen is on complex 4, pulling those electrons down and producing water. And don't forget, CO2 is the other byproduct. So if you have very efficient respiration, don't forget, we take in oxygen, and every breath that we exhale has moisture, and CO2, which is water and CO2 from the foods that we ate. Now you do get more energy. Well, when you say, "Oh yeah, fatty acids give you a lot of carbon hydrogen bonds," and don't forget, every time we break a carbon hydrogen bond, we're releasing the energy of the sun, which came to us through a photosynthetic process. So the sun makes carbon hydrogen bonds during the photosynthetic process. When we eat foods, we break those carbon hydrogen bonds and capture the energy of the sun in the electron transport chain. So we're just getting the energy of and we're doing it in a very graded and a very graded and regulated way. So this is normal physiological metabolism. But Ketone Body by Veach. Now Veach was a very smart guy, NIH guy, a collaborator of mine, Hans Krebs' last student. So we would talk for hours and hours about this stuff. And we know that ketone bodies are more energy efficient than either pyruvate or fatty acids. Fatty acids have so many carbon hydrogen bonds, they'll actually dissipate the proton motive gradient. Then really uncoupling proteins are upregulated, and it's like having a pressure cooker. It's so much pressure in there, you have to let some of the pressure out a little bit, and that's from fatty acids. Generally, will do that. Carbs don't generally do that, and certainly ketone bodies don't do that. So again, you have to know how everything is broken down into these common pathways to generate the energy of our cell. And yes, energy, in my mind, is essential for everything. Without energy, nothing can live. Nothing can live without energy, and cyanide shows you that. And now the key thing is cyanide doesn't kill the cancer cell. That's the key. So it gets energy without oxygen. Therefore, it can survive hypoxia. It can grow in a hypoxic, very minimal oxygen. It can grow in cyanide. We know. We tested all this. We did the experiments next door here. So we're in the business of killing tumor cells without toxicity. That's the key. That's what we're doing. And people need to know that we're hell bent on killing tumor cells without toxicity and showing the results that can happen. And that's our focus, and that's what we do. Yeah, well, most of it right now is hit or miss. Nobody is following exactly what Dr. Duryea and I and others have put together, mainly because we can't. The system does not presently allow this. We find that in hospitals, they'll say, oh, maybe for glioblastoma, we'll consider metabolic therapy only after the standard of care doesn't work. Well, the standard of care almost never works. So what the hell are you doing? And this is the problem. They say, okay, we're going to do standard of care, and then we're going to do standard of care metabolic therapy following the failure of standard of care, and they call that for recurrent glioblastoma. But where the hell is metabolic therapy without the standard of care or modified standard of care? We certainly think that surgery is a necessary component for managing glioblastoma. But we can shrink the tumor down, make it indolent, and then surgically debulk it, okay? And then follow it on with more metabolic therapy. And we don't need temozolomide. And if we do need temozolomide, we would use it in very, very low dosages. So we just have to know what to do and how to do it. We know the tumor cell cannot survive with the two fuels, and they can't switch to ketone bodies. So why would anyone want to do anything that doesn't target the prime problem of the cancer? Oh, we're going to use a virus. Oh, we're going to use a vaccine. Oh, we're going to use this. Oh, we're going to take away the damn fermentable fuels. That's what you need to do. Why is that so hard for anybody to understand? They keep throwing all this crazy stuff. Polio virus in the brain. What are you kidding me? I
Yeah.
mean, how could you? They put some space helmet on some of these poor guys and blast your head with electricity. I mean, this is like I told many people, this is medieval.
Yeah.
This crazy stuff is medieval. The two fuels are telling us, please take away our fermentable fuels and you will get success. So I don't know. What does the gasoline produce? Energy,
Right.
right? And what does
Right.
what does it do? It combines with octane and oxygen and a spark. Octane, oxygen, and a spark, and the waste products are CO2 and water, besides some other contaminants
Sure.
that your catalytic converter is supposed to take care of. So there's the energy, right? You don't have energy, your car can't go. You can have gasoline and no spark. You can have oxygen and no gasoline. But you have to have all three of these together to drive the energy of the car. And you're right. It behooves me. There are many reasons why what I'm saying cannot be readily adapted. Number one is the world thinks cancer is a genetic disease. The National Cancer Institute says clearly on their website that cancer is a genetic disease. Nothing could be further from the scientific evidence. It is not a genetic disease. But when the National Cancer Institute tells the world that it is, and your research grants at the top medical schools are all based on hunting for genes, sequencing mutations, and looking at this and looking at that, you're not going to make any advance in the field. And the new data just came out the other day. We now have 1,700 people a day dying from cancer in the United States, and that comes to 70 people an hour. As you and I are talking, people are dying from cancer in all these different hospitals around the country. Absolutely. We can change it within 3 to 4 or 5 years and a 10-year period. Once you target the two fuels and transition the body over to nutritional ketosis, it's a process. It's a process. We know how to do it. We have evidence to say this is it because cancer is a mitochondrial metabolic disorder. It's not a genetic disorder. So we know how to do it. You set the trials up and we'll show you the evidence. Who's going to pay for these trials? The National Cancer Institute? They think it's a genetic disease. They're willing to put billions of dollars into these crazy vaccines, these immunotherapies that are not working for the majority of people because all of those therapies are based on a flawed theory for the disease. When the theory is wrong, the outcome will never be optimal. So all we do is make small incremental advances, and they're always looking at progression-free survival. In other words, how does your tumor look, and how rather than overall survival? Forget about this progression-free survival. You want overall survival. You got a drug that works. Show me a 3 or 4 year extension of your life with a high quality of life. No sickness, no fatigue, none of that stuff. Then you got something. That's what metabolic therapy. You want to know what it is? That's metabolic therapy. Well, Travis supports our research through his foundation. So Travis and I are discussing all the time on this. But Travis, his foundation for cancer metabolic therapy supports our research through philanthropy. So philanthropy gives money to Travis. I get the money from Travis. I run the experiments over and over and over again. We're trying to find some flaw in our understanding of cancer as a metabolic disease. And so far, we have not found flaw. So what we can do is simply perfect, and show over and over and over again that all different kinds of cancers, breast cancer, colon cancer, bladder cancer, you name it, melanomas, blood cancers, they all have the same problem. They're all fermenters. They're all driven by glucose and glutamine. So this one therapy should be effective, if done correctly, for all the major cancers. But it's not being done because the world thinks cancer is a genetic disease, and they keep throwing billions and billions of dollars at these ineffective strategies. So at what time? Now, Travis, of course, he wrote that wonderful book, Tripping Over the Truth. He wrote another book on the fourth fuel, ketone body, talking about how important that is as a fuel. So he's been working very hard also together, and we work as a team together, and I work with a lot of. Finally, some MDs, physicians, and people are coming around to know. But setting up a clinical trial, and we're talking to folks now. Believe me, there are a lot of MDs, physicians, oncologists that would love to flesh out the exact strategy that we have. But we have too many restrictions because some of these guys feel they're going to lose their license to practice medicine if they do something outside of the standard of care. So we have to educate. I don't know if we can educate these folks. Some of these folks can't be educated. So the patients no, the patients have to rise up and make the decision. It's going to be guys like you who've lost people who've lost loved ones to cancer and have seen the consequences of what this medieval standard of care is doing to people. That does not have to happen. That does not have to happen. We can manage cancer without toxicity if done correctly. We know what to do and how to do it, and we wrote we're the tip of the spear on this whole thing. The problem is the system does not allow what I'm saying to take place. It depends on the people. It ain't going to come from the top medical schools. I can tell you that right now. They're too in bed with each other. They're backslapping. Everything is looking good. Massive revenue generation from these procedures. You think they want to change? I don't think they want to change. Okay, is the NIH going all of a sudden? Geez, we made a terrible mistake over the last 55, 70 years. Hey, maybe we should revamp the whole program here, right? Oh yeah, go. Oh, my bad. 10 million people dead. My bad. It's like, what the hell? We had this information, but I tell you, we had the information, but nobody, until we came along, nobody was able to connect the dots. We're the first guy to show a novel finding in the cancer, and that is these mitochondria are fermenting glutamine. They're not respiring glutamine. This is a big breakthrough because now we know that the mitochondria can do two things. It can get energy from oxygen, and when that doesn't happen, it can shift to an ancient fermentation pathway, which is dumping out succinic acid as a waste product. So that's a big breakthrough. People will come to know what we've done in this breakthrough. It's not obvious because it's very difficult. I can say it because I did the damn experiments. Well, I'm in a unique position here. I'm not in a medical school. My salary comes from teaching graduate and undergraduate students in the field of biology. Okay, so that's my mission. That's what my job here at the university is. But we do basic research, and Boston College does not have a medical school. We're one of the top, basic science and liberal arts universities in the world. So we focus. Our focus is on Jesuit education. We're a Jesuit-driven university with a Jesuit philosophy. We're not linked into the medical schools. I was at Yale University Medical School for 9 years, and you were only as good as your last grant. The grant that you got from the federal government maintained your position and recognition in that department. If you lost your grants, you would be eliminated or relegated to some other activity. But if you're a basic scientist in a medical school, you better damn well make sure you're bringing in revenue to that organization. Our mission here is undergraduate teaching and graduate teaching. We don't have to have. You can still do that. I get money to do my research from philanthropy, and which is not dependent on the federal government. So therefore, I can do the kinds of experiments that I think we need to do, not have to do, but need to do. And then we test all these things. And yeah, if I were dependent on NIH money, I wouldn't have written my book. I wouldn't have been able to do the things I do. And I can say what the hell I want to say because I've got the evidence to support what I'm saying. It's not like they do. I'm the one doing. We interrogated all these cancer cells. We do in vivo, in vitro. We have all the different models. We've developed the singular best animal models of cancer, natural models, not these genetically constructed monstrosities. We use natural models. And you try to cure cancer in a mouse that has a natural cancer, it's just as hard to try to do it in a human. So we have not yet cured a mouse of natural cancer. We have extended the mouse's life massively, but we have not yet achieved total success. That's why our metabolic therapy should not ever be considered a cure for cancer. It's a strategy for the non-toxic management of cancer. Whether it leads to a cure or not, we have no clue. But we can know we can keep people alive or animals alive far longer than what would have been predicted. Are they cured? We don't know. The only thing we ever cured for sure was a dog with a mast cell tumor on his face. And we published that paper on ketogenic metabolic therapy for mast cell tumor in a dog. Now, the dog at 7 years old developed this big tumor. The owner of the dog gave him raw meat, raw egg, and some fish oil, and cut the calories and did everything that we would do. And the tumor disappeared, and the dog died from heart failure, old age. A pit bull died at 15 and a half years of age, which is much longer than even the normal dog eating kibbles and whatever the hell they feed them. So the idea here is that if you die from old age when you had cancer as a youngster, and you die like 98 or 100 or 90, and the cancer never returned, okay, you were probably cured. But we can't make that statement, a blanket statement, say, oh, we can cure. No, I don't say we cure cancer. I just say we have a better way to manage it to keep the patient alive longer with a higher quality of life, right? What's wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with that? It matters a lot. And not only that, if you use metabolic therapy correctly, you can still use standards of care. You just have to know how to use them in a better way. There's a place for radiation. There's a place for chemo. There's a place for immunotherapy. All of those tools are used as the final touch to get rid of it. You don't go after the bull when it's really strong. You shrink that, make that bull weak, take away the fuels, and now he becomes much more vulnerable to radiation, chemo, and immunotherapies because it's almost on death's doorstep. It's struggling for existence, and then you can come in with low dose chemo at low doses, so the rest of the body is not getting toxic, and the ketones will protect the body against these other things. As I tell many people, we already have all of the tools in the toolbox to manage cancer very, very effectively and take the fear away from this disease. And we just have to know how to use it better, and we know how to use it better. The problem is it's not being done. It's not being done.